Recently, I had the chance to play roughly 4 to 5 hours of Armored Core 6, playing through Chapter 11. With that, I fought multiple bosses, had a chance to check out the training, fight mechs in the arena, and much more. Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon is very much an Armored Core game at its, core, but it does take some of the elements FromSoftware as a company have learned over the past 10 years from their recent games. That said, in my time interviewing Armored Core 6 director Masaru Yamamura, even questions like, what experiences working on Sekiro did he bring into Armored Core 6, had him immediately reiterating that Armored Core is a completely different franchise and unlike any of FromSoftware's most recent ventures. So before going forward, let's discuss what Armored Core is. Armored Core is a series that focuses on building your ideal AC mech as you complete various, typically short missions. There's no interwoven world like the Souls games. The action feels entirely different as you're controlling and fighting various mechs that can fly in the air and have, in this case, 4 different weapons that you can fire off at the same time, so long as your enemy is locked into your targets, and that's no different for the enemy ACs you'll be fighting against. If there's one thing the game does have in common with its Souls-like contemporaries, is that the games are notoriously difficult and have a high skill ceiling. Now, there are 15 Armored Core games that released prior to 6. However, playing Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon, it's clear that FromSoftware realized that many players going into it would probably be from their new Soulsy audience, and probably unfamiliar with any of the prior games in the series. I think Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon could be one of the most approachable Armored Core games the company has ever created. Prior games would immediately throw you into the deep end. Early entries in the series had no tutorials, no training of the controls, no explanation of the mechanics, and expected you to just figure out on your own how to control a massive mech, what tricks you could perform, and more importantly, the garage and building aspect to Armored Core. A major focus on the games has always been on its garage and shop. You'll earn parts throughout the game as well as money you can spend on more parts. You can buy various types of legs for your mech, from bipedal to reverse joint to tank, various cores with different energy outputs, boosters, arm parts, heads, weapons for each arm, weapons for each shoulder, chips to install, and more. All of these affect your AC's weight, and you'll find the delicate balancing act of creating the most powerful mech with the amount of speed, mobility, defense, offensive power, weapon type, aim type, and even type of movements you want. You can sell parts for the same amount of money as you bought them, so the game actively encourages you to try new builds. However, everything I mentioned above is pretty overwhelming for a new player, especially when you're given all of these options right out of the gate and you could easily hit a kind of choice paralysis. Enter Armored Core 6. In Fires of Rubicon, the game's first mission, Illegal Entry, introduces you to the game's base mechanics and acts as a simple tutorial. From there, you'll unlock training simulators, each of which equip you with completely different mech builds and teach you the mechanics of each of these builds. For completing a tutorial, you'll earn one of the parts from that build and be able to equip it on your mech if you enjoyed its playstyle. You won't unlock new tutorials until completing a certain number of story missions, which prevents you from playing endless tutorials from the get-go. Your shop is also fairly limited at the start. You won't have many options to choose from, even in terms of what types of weapons you can purchase for your mech. What all of this meant was that throughout my roughly 4 to 5 hours playing Armored Core 6, I was slowly learning brand new playstyles the entire time. While some Armored Core fans will definitely be disappointed they won't be able to immediately jump into the garage and start putting together their favorite builds of the past, this felt like a great way to introduce the series to a new generation of players. I never felt like I was in a tutorial loop due to the slow trickle of tutorial missions, but I genuinely felt like I was rapidly improving at the game throughout my entire session. The original Armored Core games had your mechs as fairly slow and cumbersome. They felt heavy. Not in a bad way, but in a way that you'd imagine a big hulking mech might feel. 2006's Armored Core 4 and 2008's For Answer were a new generation of Armored Core games, representing Hidetaka Miyazaki's introduction to directing Armored Core. With it, he made the ACs far more mobile, making them quick and dangerous. With Armored Core 5, which he wasn't involved in, the mobility was once again reduced, focusing instead on multiplayer. Armored Core 6 takes heavy inspiration from Armored Core 4 here. You'll be able to easily use boosters to dash, jump, and fly around, throwing out a barrage of missiles. Certain mech types can even hover above the ground without consuming energy, reducing the recoil you'll experience with certain guns and allowing you to rain hell on enemies down below. With this new emphasis on mobility, the Armored Core team specifically sought to make the levels far more vertical and cited the newer FromSoft games as an inspiration here, with the level design being a much bigger emphasis than ever before. In one of the more interesting missions I had the chance to play, I found myself dashing to a giant weaponized mining ship that, from a distance, shot a devastating beam out at my AC. However, once reaching it, it was fairly vulnerable and required me to shoot down its legs, then climb up and traverse it as part of it detached and attempted to escape. Other missions had me hiding behind walls as snipers shot at me, dashing out to get attacks in on my targets, then hiding back to safety. While prior AC games definitely require you to use your terrain to your advantage, AC6 felt like a true step up in the thoughtfulness of the level structure. Another major element to Armored Core 6 are the bosses. These were the true tests of the game and what will probably be the most familiar to Souls vets. Not every mission has one, but when they do show up, you know that you're going to be in for that classic difficult but rewarding experience FromSoftware has become known for. The first of these was an HC helicopter that you had to fight off during the tutorial mission. Even this gave me a rough time, until I figured out I had a beam saber, which rightfully demolished the thing. Of course, I'm confident after my 4-hour play session I could go back now and absolutely destroy the copter with no trouble, which goes to show that learning and mastering the mechanics, just like other From games, is a major aspect to your success. And while there were 2 more major bosses I got to fight in my playtime, the first of these was definitely the biggest hurdle, and one where I'd occasionally look up to view other players' play sessions, only to see them getting absolutely wrecked by this guy. It definitely seemed to be the Margit of Armored Core 6, and I am talking about the Juggernaut. The Juggernaut has a massive shield in front of its body, so the only way to hurt it is by getting behind. And fortunately, when you start fighting him, you'll have a buddy AC helping distract the Juggernaut so you can sneak behind and get in hits. Of course, the AC leaves mid-fight, leaving you alone with this tanking terror who, as it turns out, has massive speed boosts and spins regularly, so anytime you try to get behind it, it's already gone. So you'll be forced to figure out its patterns, learn how to dodge, and try to figure out how to damage it. Meanwhile, the second boss was more about dodging. The Baltius shot out bullet hell style missiles while also charging in to attack with its very own fire blade, and helping you throughout all of this is a brand new health and continue system. While some previous AC games let you restore health mid-mission, in 5 for example you could scan and find areas where you could pay money to restore your AC and respec it, the health system in Fires of Rubicon acts more like the Dark Souls Estus Flask system. You'll start every mission with 3 health boosts you can use at any time, and once you're out, that's it. At least until you use a continue, another one of the major new change-ups. Now, there are various checkpoints in the missions, so if you die, you can just restart at the checkpoint. And as a bonus, your health usages will even be restored here. What that means is, you can struggle to get to a checkpoint using all 3 health boosts, die after hitting it, and then restart at your checkpoint with all 3 health boosts back intact. While this might sound like it's too forgiving, the missions are a little longer than some of the previous entries, so this was likely to help account for that. On top of that, once you reach the Juggernaut, you will be very, very glad you have a checkpoint right before him. When speaking with Masaru Yamamura, director on Armored Core 6, I asked him how often players would need to go back into the garage to retool their AC for a mission they were stuck on, or if they would need to completely change their build for certain missions. He said this was one of the most difficult aspects for them to balance, and while they wanted assembly to still be hugely important to the game, as it always has been, they also wanted players to be able to stick with their favorite builds if they so choose. I have no doubt that some Armored Core fans will be potentially disappointed by things like this, but for me, I felt like the openness of potential playstyles felt fitting for the game. There's also a brand new targeting system more akin to the Souls games. While you can target the traditional AC way, where you try to keep enemies in your sights, there's a new targeting that helps you keep your reticle on enemies. That said, I actually found myself not using it too often, so it's hard for me to comment on it. Another element brought back to AC6 from previous Armored Core games, and one I was glad to see, was the arena. It's not something you'll start with right away, but rather an element you'll need to unlock. Once you do, you'll be pitted in one-on-one arena fights with other ACs with a reward structure of its own. It's worth mentioning that the multiplayer will be stripped down this time around for Armored Core 6, at least compared to 5. I didn't get to try out the multiplayer during my playtime, but according to Yamamura-san, the team wanted to concentrate on single player, but there will be an online versus mode available at launch for players who want to use it. Finally, let's talk about the story. Lately, FromSoftware has become known for the cryptic storytelling style of Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring. I've made quite a few lore videos about them, and they definitely require some digging. Armored Core 6 isn't that. The story is much more straightforward, similar to Sekiro or, of course, previous AC games, and told through your mission briefings before you set out. You'll also learn more elements through comms dialogue during each mission. However, Yamamura-san did inform me that you'll be able to find AC wrecks out in the field, and these would have fragmented pieces of the story you can put together to get a larger interpretation of the world, and were more akin to that Soulsborne storytelling. The story itself, so far, is pretty classic Armored Core. In the past, a resource known as coral was rediscovered that led to all kinds of human innovation, but it was lost. But here at Rubicon, the embers of coral continue to burn, leading to corporations seeking to uproot the citizens of the planet for their own gain. You play as a mercenary working for said corporations. If it's not clear at this point, I walked away from Armored Core 6 with a very positive impression of the game. To me, Armored Core 6 felt like a nice mix of some of the best elements of the previous Armored Core games and what FromSoftware has learned over the past 10 years. I'm sure some former fans of the Armored Core series won't like some of the changes to the formula, and anyone coming into the game expecting Dark Souls or Elden Ring will be sorely disappointed. But if you want a new, high-quality FromSoftware experience, then Fires of Rubicon definitely seems to be delivering. And I, for one, cannot wait to pick up the game, tear through the HC helicopter with my new skill set, and try out some new builds.